Hey guys, it's Brent with Lykins Motorsports. I hope you guys are having a good week so far. We're into the weekend here. I just wanted to give you an update and show you some tech here in a minute, but give you an update on current situation of the engine builds that we got going on. The first of which is Mr. Ron's 363 small block Ford. So if you pick up from where we left off on the last video on his engine, we were sending his intake manifold off to Mr. Joe to be ported. So we're using an Edelbrock Performer RPM air gap intake. And as I mentioned, to send that off to Joe, he had it ported. So Joe always flows these intakes before he does any work to them, just to see what the differential is. From what I understand, the air gap intake is pretty consistent from the ones that he has measured in the past. So he will flow all 8 runners, average those together, and I think most of them go around 260 CFM. The gist of all of this is that you want your intake manifold to not be a bottleneck. So you want it to be above the capability of your cylinder heads. These are Dart Iron Eagle cylinder heads. They flow about 300 CFM at our lift. Joe has increased the average torque, or I'm sorry, the average flow numbers of this intake manifold by about 70 numbers. So we went up from 260 average CFM to 330 average CFM. So that is a huge increase. This is going to be just an excellent test for me to see different combinations. So sometimes we get to take an engine to the dyno and we try things throughout the day, different parts, that sort of thing. Sometimes we have to build multiple iterations of a particular combination to see the difference. I've built this combination several times before. So just to refresh your memory, Dart SHP block, Scat steel crankshaft, Scat I-beam rods, Mahle pistons. This is using one of my custom hydraulic roller cams. So if we just look from underneath the cylinder heads down, so block, rotating assembly, camshaft, all those parts. I've done this very combination before using some AFR 185cc heads and an out-of-the-box Performer RPM air gap intake. So we're doing that same combination again, except we're changing the cylinder head capability and the intake manifold capability. So from an AFR 185cc head, RPM air gap intake, to ported Iron Eagle heads, ported RPM air gap intake. Really looking forward to seeing what the difference is. Dyno is still down. They're telling me somewhere around Thanksgiving, 1st of December, before it's up and running, and then I'll have to make an appointment to get down there. Intake manifold's on its way back here. The valve covers are being etched with my logo. So by the end of next week, hope to have this engine on the cradle on the floor and ready to go. We're going to talk about some other progress here going on some other engine builds, and then we're going to take a look at Mr. Ron's distributor, and we're going to discuss some distributor modifications, recurving a distributor. All right, so next engine is JJ Jr. that you see behind me there, and those GT40P heads were also ported, and we added some 1.7 rocker arms. So getting ready, what I'll try to do is dyno these two engines on the same day, so I can take both engines down and knock them out both on the same day. Previous iteration of JJ Jr. non-ported heads, factory rocker arms, we were getting about 350 horsepower, 350 pound-feet of torque. So in the cylinder head flow, I think we picked up about 30 numbers on it. And then we added those Crowler steel 1/7 ratio rocker arms. Those are the two variables that we'll be testing. So hopefully we get to see some big numbers on that one. Let's see what else we got going on. Mr. Marks, tunnel port small block Ford. The guides, we had to have some custom valve guides made. CHE made some custom bronze valve guides for us. They came in. The heads should be finished next week. And then I can check piston to valve clearance. I've only got one piston hanging on the rod. I've got one piston rod assembly installed in the motor. Cam has been degreed, so we'll check our piston to valve clearance with some checking springs, and then I'll do some measuring on the install heights, and we'll get some valve springs picked out for that engine. Then we can get the cylinder heads installed and that sort of thing. I'm staring at his intake manifold right now. It's a 2x4 tunnel port small block Ford intake manifold. This is a dry sump engine. I would really like to plug those holes that I tapped in the lifter valley. This is a World Products block. It does not have a rear drain in the valley, and I kind of had to help the block on the front drain. So what I'd like to do is plug all those drain holes in the valley and then scavenge with my dry sump pump, so I can pull vacuum from the top and I can drain whatever oil's in the lifter valley as well. I think I have a plan on how to do that, and it'll take just a little bit of machine work, but it'll be pretty non-noticeable, and I'll show you that once we get to that point. Let's see. I've got a handful of FE builds in the works. Mr. Mike's 511 FE with the FE power cylinder heads are back here behind me as well. We're waiting on FE power to send the intake manifold. Joe has the intake adapter, and he can't do anything until the intake manifold gets there, and then he could port those two together. That engine is pretty much ready to rock and roll. Just got to even got the push rods in there, and all that's been checked out. Just need to get the intakes on there. We got a pair of quick fuel carburetors to go on, and that engine is going to make some pretty big horsepower. Got a camera coming up, so 527 cubic inch camera. Got the valves on the way for that single overhead cam motor from Manley, and then we can start ordering some valve train parts for it. I've got a handful of 496 and 511 FEs. I've got an all aluminum 482 to do, and a bunch of 511. So a lot of stuff working through the shop. I'm pretty glad that I haven't had to do any FE work here recently. I'm feeling pretty good about my back now, but picking up, a 75-pound FE crank would probably put me a couple steps back. So if anybody out there is hankering for a small block Ford build, I could probably work you in right now in the mix of all this other stuff. So a 363, 427, 445, something like that, where I can lift some light parts. So if you're interested, give me a yell and we'll talk about that. All right, so that wraps that up. So yeah, I showed you this a second ago. This is an MSD distributor. This is a part number 857931. It's a very long MSD part number. It's got a steel gear on it. And we're going to talk about how to recurve these distributors and the reason why we recurve. And let's talk about what that means. The distributor, obviously, if you did not advance the timing as the RPM goes up, you'd have some pretty big issues with how your engine runs. So all your distributors have a weight and a spring setup and a stop setup. And this will vary from factory distributors to your aftermarket. So MSD has their own design, factory Ford has their own design, and a factory Ford is a lot more complicated to recurve. You can recurve an MSD in about 2 or 3 minutes. You can do it with the distributor in the block. There's just not much to it. So you have these weights that sling open with centrifugal speed. You have 2 springs that control how quickly these springs sling out, or these weights sling out. And then you have an internal bushing that limits the amount of advance that your distributor is putting out. So you have your initial timing, which is set at idle or close to it, and then you have the amount of advance, mechanical advance, that your distributor allows you to have as the RPM goes up. Some vacuum distributors will have a vacuum advance that adds advance on top of your mechanical advance. So all of this depends on how your combination is set up. This depends on how efficient your combustion chamber is on your cylinder head. This depends on your compression ratio, the weight of your vehicle, what you're doing with it. All of that goes into what your bushing and spring combination needs to be. I will tell you that MSD sends these with a very, very lazy timing curve. And if I remember correctly, all the advance doesn't come in until about 4,000 RPM. So anything below that, if you're in the gas hard, the timing is not where it's making peak horsepower, so the engine is going to feel lazy. A lot of guys email, call, text saying, you know, I have this particular factory combination, and what can I do to make it feel snappier or better? This is one of the free things that you can do to instantly make your car or your truck feel quicker, and you're not changing the horsepower of your engine, but you're changing the RPM at which that horsepower is available to you. And just putting around town, setting the curve properly on your distributor will make your engine feel a whole lot more powerful in the RPM range that you're running. So big deal, recurving your distributor. Free horsepower here, down low. So I'm going to get the camera off the tripod, and I'll call in my cameraman, and we're going to show you some of the parts and how they work and how to recurve this distributor in front of the camera. Easy thing to do, and we'll go over some the MSD instruction manual to show you what the different curves do, that sort of thing. So let's plug on. All right, so let's take a look at MSD's manual real quick. We're going to start off by looking at these the bushing size. So the bushing is what controls. You can see the different ones down in this package that they send. There's a black one, there's a purple, green, and a red one, and something else down in there, a silver. So that's what controls how much mechanical advance that you get over the initial timing setting. The largest bushing limits the most. So your black bushing, approximate crankshaft degrees, 18. And so what we're going to do, we take a look at our initial timing and how much advance that we need for this particular cylinder head. So these are very efficient cylinder heads. They're not going to want a lot of timings, probably somewhere around 32, 34 degrees. On initial timing, I usually set my engine somewhere between 16 and 18 degrees. So that with a larger, little bit spicier camshaft, you want to make sure you get a good complete combustion of that. So if I set my initial timing at 16 and I have 18 degrees of mechanical advance, that would put me at about 34 degrees total, which is pretty much in the ballpark of where we need to be. So MSD shows you which color bushing you use to get to the where you need to be on your total advance. So if you haven't looked at this, this is MSD's distributor curve. This tells you how quick your timing curve is going to come in. So the bushing is on the right side of the chart. The spring is on the bottom of the chart. So if we just take, so the distributor, let me show you the distributor real quick. So it's got 2 heavy silver springs, and can't remember which bushing is in there from the factory. Bushing is in here, so it's the blue bushing, and I took the weights and everything off of here so you can see which one it is. So we've got a blue bushing and 2 heavy silver springs. So if I follow the curves, this particular distributor would have all the mechanical advance in by 4,000 RPM. That means when you're putting around town at 2,500, 3,000 RPM, and you put your foot to the floor, then it'll take until 4,000 RPM before you get all of your mechanical advance in. Okay, so that'll make it feel like it's a really lazy engine. What we like to do is to custom tailor the distributor, the timing curve, to the particular combination that we're working on. Mr. Ron's car and engine that we're working on is a lighter Mustang. He's not pulling a horse trailer, at least I hope not. He's not hauling hay or anything like that. This is a light car that's going to have a pretty spicy engine in it. And when he starts to put his foot in the floor, we want all that timing to come in pretty quickly and get all that horsepower in. So if we bring it in somewhere around the 2,800 or 3,000 RPM mark, that should be good. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you got the engine lugged down and you put your foot to the floor and you get all your timing in, but the engine is lugged. You don't want to put yourself in that position. You'll get some timing pinging or something like that. So let's look at the combinations down here below. Let's see if we can find a good curve for our combination. Now remember, we want to use the black bushing to get all of the timing in fairly early on our total. So if I use the black bushing, we come across here. If I use this 1 silver heavy and 1 silver light spring, that should put us at about 2,800 RPM. And that would be a pretty good situation for us to be in. We could also do this black bushing. We come over here and it would get us at about a 2,500 RPM by when all the timing is in. So, all right, so I reviewed or thought about Mr. Ron's combination a little bit more and decided to go with the light blue springs, which would put all of our timing in by 2,500 RPM. You can get away with that with a lighter car and a deeper rear end gear, so it doesn't lug the engine as much. What I'm doing now is I'm taking a 5/16 wrench. I am pulling off this nut and the little washer underneath of it where the bushing sits. Magnet didn't magnet. Okay. And then we're going to pull that bushing out. All right, so blue bushing was what was in it. All right, so I, decided to try it this way. All right, and now got to put the washer on. This stuff never happens when I'm not filming. All right. All Alright, so apologize for that. I had to stop the video. I had a phone call coming in that was important. So I did get the nut on there. I'm going to spin that on with my fingers. And then I'm going to take my wrench and tighten that up. You don't need to put a death grip on it. Just get it tight and snug down. You can actually break the little stud that everything rides on, and that'll ruin your day pretty quick. Alright, then we'll get our weights put back on. Then these look like little standoffs. And then our springs. So my advice to you is just to be very cautious, because these will go very far across the room if you don't have a good handle on them. I like using my fingernails to get these spring loops started in the groove. Whoops. Just stretch it. Like that. Just give it a test twist. And we're ready to go. So we changed our bushing, we changed our springs. Now our distributor will give us the amount of total advance that we want, and it'll give us the amount of total advance in the RPM range that we want. Alright, so we're going to put our rotor back on. Okay, and now we can put our distributor in the block. Alright, so we're just going to temporarily drop our distributor in, and I've got a paper towel down the hole right now, but we'll just go ahead and put our distributor in. We're going to get our timing right, so once all of our valves are ran, so I really don't have to turn the engine over anymore from this point on, so we'll get everything parked and ready to go, and then we can just drop our distributor in. So on a small block Ford, this is an intake rocker, exhaust rocker. We're going to, that's our intake opening and closing, exhaust opening and starting to close. And then because of overlap, our intake rocker is opening and starting to close. When it's starting to close, you look down here. So this is going to be where your timing pointer is and your timing marks. I'm going to set this at about 32 or 34 degrees, like right there. And now when I put my distributor in, it'll have the correct amount of advance, and this engine will fire immediately. All right, we'll put our seal on our distributor. This is just an O-ring. It goes in this O-ring groove right here. And then we'll pack our gear with assembly lube. This is Joe Gibbs driven assembly lube. I really like this stuff. Put some on where the distributor rides in the block, on the bottom side of the gear. So normal position for the rotor on a small block Ford is pointing towards the rear. I could point this rotor anywhere that I wanted, and as long as it points at the #1 terminal on the cap, the engine would run just fine. Most of your spark plug wire sets are lengthened for where the rotor is pointing towards the rear. So that's what we'll do. So if something happens and the distributor won't seat, you can walk it around. If you notice, you'll get to a point where it will seat, but you can back it back out. Okay, I want to be a little bit to the left of that, like that. So rotor's pointing towards the rear. We've got our distributor set. Usually MSD boxes and that sort of thing are mounted on the fender well or that sort of thing. And we've got our timing set, our distributor set, and we're ready to go. So the intake will come in. We'll put the intake manifold on. We'll put our valve covers on. Plugs and plug wires in. This thing will be ready to fire up. All right, guys. So hopefully next week we will have we'll be able to button this engine up. We'll get some more work started on our tunnel port small block Ford. So make sure that you tune in so you don't miss any of that. Beginning of December, hopefully we'll get all this on the dyno. And it's kind of unfortunate that we have to wait, but things happen and not everything goes perfectly right all the time. So hope you guys are having a good week and a good weekend. Get out, enjoy the weather, work on your own stuff, and I'll see you next week. Hey guys, just a little bit of a tack on at the end here. This is JJ Jr. and set up for a 4150 carburetor. Let me show you something else real quick. It wouldn't be dyno testing if you didn't try different stuff. This is a 750 Dominator that I had Drew Pajednik fix up for me. The carburetor is bigger than the engine, but we're going to give it a shot. Put in the comment section how much more horsepower you think the 750 Dominator will make over our 650 Holly. You guys have a good weekend.